And Plant's interest in the old masters led him to one of the most profoundly significant figures of the genre, Robert Johnson. Though his impact would only be felt posthumously, amid myths of a crossroads pact with the devil and rumour about the circumstances of his death, Johnson's few recordings became one of the most enduring influences, not only on the young Robert Plant, but also on the artists of the burgeoning British blues scene.
Robert Johnson was an extraordinary figure, quite possibly the deepest, darkest voice of that solo troubadour blues singer out of the Delta, accompanying themselves on nothing more than a six-string guitar. Interestingly, Johnson's significance really only comes into play after his recordings have been re-released on Columbia in 1960-61. He died pretty much in obscurity. He'd made these recordings, he'd only ever done 2 or 3 sessions in his life. He'd made these recordings in 1935 and 1936. He died and nobody even knew he was dead. And so these recordings re-emerge at a crucial time in the development of rock music. 1960-61, they're heard by Bob Dylan, they're heard by the musicians in Britain who went on to create the British blues boom. We're talking about Eric Clapton and the Stones and these people. And they have an enormous influence.
I went to the crossroads.
Everybody who heard that album was knocked sideways by it. Wonderful imagery in his songs. Great guitar player, had a fantastic voice. And he wrote most of his songs. Some of them he adapted from earlier things, but he adapted them such that he totally made them his own.
He had amazing technical ability as a guitarist, natural ability, untutored. He could just do it. He had a great voice. He wrote a few really good songs, and he drew it all together in that very short period of his life. And what a legacy to leave. I mean, Mozart wrote 250 pieces, whatever. Robert Johnson just left us 20, 30 songs or so.
You know, I grabbed up my suitcase, took out down the road. Oh, when I got there.
Plant continued to develop his interest in early Delta artists, attending a performance by legendary bluesman Son House at Birmingham Town Hall while he was still only 14 years of age. But it was the British R&B boom that formed the template for a potential career in music. The development of R&B in the early 60s had performed 2 important functions for young aspirants of Plant's generation. Firstly, it had served to introduce American blues to a UK audience. And secondly, its reinterpretation of the form had opened an artistic space in which blues-based bands could find popular success.
He then discovers John Lee Hooker, Sonny Boy Williamson, Jimmy Reed, all of these people whose songs are being covered by this generation of British groups that are emerging, including, of course, the Yardbirds, featuring Plant's future friend and collaborator Jimmy Page.
Blues had gained some exposure during the 50s on the British jazz circuit, where bandleader Chris Barber had incorporated an R&B segment into his popular show. But as with jazz and folk before it, the club scene was where the blues found its natural home. Blues Incorporated, a band led by former Barber associate Alexis Corner, fronted a regular club night in Ealing that soon became the focal point for aficionados from across London.
He's pivotal. Dear Alexis Corner, I mean, it's so sad that he's not with us now because he should be Sir Alexis Corner, in my opinion. I mean, he was not only such a wonderful exponent of the blues, but he was so helpful to young players too, I mean, I don't think we were the only ones to be given a sort of an interval spot at one of the places he was playing at, and that was a sort of a first break, I mean, I don't know whether, I'd go as far as to say it wouldn't have happened without him, but he was incredibly helpful. And he had a wonderful voice. He's much missed, I think.
He was almost the home of all the sort of dewy-eyed kids who wanted to play, you know, rhythm and blues.
People like Mick Jagger, Keith Richards, Brian Jones, Paul Jones, all these people would go to the Ealing Club where Blues Incorporated played every Saturday night, I think it was. He would let them sit in. It didn't matter how good, how bad they were, you know. You want to have a play? Alexis was a man with open ears and an open heart. I dearly miss him. The Ealing Club was immediately beside Ealing Station. You came out, turned right, down the steps. It was this sort of, not quite a basement, not quite the ground floor. It was hot and it was sweaty and it was crowded. And it's where I did my very first gig with Manfred Mann.
It was a coal cellar. I mean, it was awful, down some dreadful steps. I just felt this is where I want to die. I mean, I've woken up in this utopia. I mean, it was dirty, it was filthy, it was cold in the winter. But, you know, you could meet your friends and hear this great music and you felt very relaxed and really as though you were pivotally part of something, you know, that was going to happen.
I want to tell you how it's going to be. You're going to give your love to me. I want to love you night and day. Well, you know my love and I fade away. You know my love and I fade away.
With the scene that had begun in the clubs mushrooming into a national phenomenon, British pop music underwent a complete transformation. Though blues-based, young British bands had adapted the genre to create their own brand of R&B, and it was this new, energetic sound that broke out of the specialist realm of folk blues clubs and into the charts.
We wanted to play that music. We were white musicians, so, you know, it was never going to be that brilliant. But what we did have was tremendous energy. I know in the Yardbirds, and there was a tremendous, you know, rift between the audience and the band. The sort of more energetic we played, the more audience response there was. So again, electricity was helpful. You know, you got a certain amount of volume, coupled with energy, kind of gave us a more of a distinctive sound to the music that we were trying to copy.
I met a dame, she was a handsome, one of a real cool thing. She was a pretty from New York City, one of me short on down that whole building with a heap. And oh, I just couldn't let her go down and get along.
We were speeding the music up, to be honest. The originals would be never played at that speed. So we kind of created our own sound, although based on, you know, on the music and the imports that we'd heard.
This then became a sort of parallel stream to the sound of the Beatles and Mersey Beat and, you know, Herman's Hermits and so forth. It was obviously much blacker and sort of more rooted in sort of sexuality, and hence the Stones were kind of big threat to the status quo.
Well, when we first started playing together, we started playing because we wanted to play rhythm and blues, and Howling Wolf was one of our greatest idols, and it's a great pleasure to find he's been booked on this show tonight. It really is a pleasure.
Thanks for Howling, Jack.
So I think it's about time you shut up and we had Howling Wolf on stage.
Yeah, I agree. Okay. Let's get him on. Howling Wolf, bring him on.
The public enthusiasm that British R&B bands displayed for their blues forefathers encouraged enterprising promoters to arrange UK tours featuring some of the genre's biggest names. The renaissance that these artists found in Britain provided younger aspirants, including Robert Plant, the invaluable opportunity to encounter their idols firsthand. Indeed, the work of several of the acts that had arrived in the early 60s later became an integral feature of the Led Zeppelin songbook, including Muddy Waters, Sonny Boy Williamson, and Howlin' Wolf.
Once the British blues boom had taken off, these old guys who really were having difficulty in finding a gig in America by this stage, they find that they're far more popular in Britain and Europe than they are back home. So they start touring.
My sister Joanne, well, we both used to go to the Croydon Jazz Club on a Friday, and then on the Saturday was the Crawdaddy Club where the Yardbirds played. And I didn't go one Saturday, and Joe came home and said in the morning, "You never guess who I met in the bar at the Star?" I said, "No, who?" "Sonny Boy Williamson and Muddy Waters." As you do in Croydon.
The touring American